Hey there, everyone. Welcome. It's Lotus, Art of Sacred Embodiment. It is Christmas Eve, and I wanted to come on and talk a little bit about transformation. So if you have been watching my videos and if you resonate with them, I would love it if you subscribed to my channel if you have not yet. And stay tuned because we've got some new material and content coming in the new year. So I just wanted to put that in as I'm going to be a little bit more consistent and dedicated and focused now that I've gotten the groundwork laid for the channel and for what I'm going to be bringing forth as we move into 2025. So thank you, and thank you to all who have subscribed and liked the videos. I really appreciate that, and I really love connecting with you guys here. So I wanted to talk about transformation, and I'm doing that within the context of Christmas and going into the new year. So Christmas really is that rebirthing motif, right? Coming back from the darkness into the light. The new light is coming onto the earth. Jesus in the West being that symbol and that being, that Christed presence that began to pave the way for greater light, higher consciousness, and more love on the planet. And that's been a collective, symbol, or more than that really, spiritual path for many in one way, shape, or form. And yet when we look back at even Jesus prior to his time on really on the cross, right? Moving towards that. And this isn't really about the religion. This is more about the message that we could receive for ourselves personally as we walk our path on this plane and as we meet head on those trials and tribulations and, go through those periods of doubt and fear when we don't know what's on the other side, when we don't know really what we're walking into. And, we see that within those days before the crucifixion and then even at the time of the crucifixion. But I'm getting ahead, right? However, when Jesus is coming onto this planet, when he is being born as a symbol of transformation, a symbol of light, teaching and guiding us to move from darkness into light. And Christmas, even though it is really about that gathering of family together, right, coming together, there's a lot of more of the cultural indoctrination that we have around what Christmas is, and which is lovely and fine because it does bring unity within our systems, within our family systems, ideally, not always. But really the deeper meaning connects us to solstice, right? Connects us to the winter time, the feminine time, and that time of really looking back over the year that has come before, the cycle that has come before. So we can really begin to recognize what have we transformed? How have we grown? How have we opened our heart more? How have we evolved our consciousness, our way of being? How have we moved through our trials and tribulations, so to speak, in order to come into a new expression of our being, to be born, right? To be born. So part of this, I think everybody is aware of that meme that talks about, that shows like the circle, right? And then in the middle of the circle is a little dot. And so when we're in the middle of that circle, we're in our comfort zone. And then the further we move out towards the parameter is when we start growing. It's when we start inviting in a letting go of how we've held or been in the world with certain things, and how it's going to be when we move forward into something brand new. And there is that phase of the unknown. And the unknown is very scary for most of us, because our root chakras, particularly that first and second chakra, and that first chakra really wants to ground us into safety, security. And in our culture, what we have learned from security is, part of security and safety is that we know that we keep everything stable and predictable in some way, shape, or form, so that we can feel safe in the world. And yet, when we do this, we don't actually stretch our resilience, know the fortitude and the capacity that we have in order to transform. So I'm going to give a short example on this, personal one. So, in everybody's hesitancy, inhibitions, resistances, fears, doubts, all of that is very different, right, for every person. And that is going to pertain to their own personal experiences in the past, and maybe even past lifetimes that we don't even know, and about who we're going to be asked to be when we step into a whole different arena. What is that going to feel like? And so I want to bring in that space of like empowerment, that oftentimes we're also very afraid of our own deeper power. And that's not an egoic power. It's a deep soul empowerment. So, years ago, I don't remember what year it was. It was probably 2011, 2012. We moved to Los Angeles, my ex-husband and I. We were in Arizona. And prior to that, I had been in Portland, Oregon, in the city, pretty much for 20 years. Navigated the city, loved that urban experience, right? Had very little trepidation about walking, to and from work. I would walk like an hour sometimes from one end of the city to the next in order to get to work. And I loved the energy of that, all of it, right? And then we moved to Tucson, which was smaller and a little bit more quiet. And then came the time that we felt called to go to Los Angeles. And Byron, my ex-husband, he wasn't ready to kind of pick up and move as quickly as I was. I tend to have a pretty swift momentum when I know what my next alignment is. And I was ready, right? I fell in love with LA. I couldn't wait to get there. And so I left 3 months ahead of him and stayed with a cousin of mine that was in Pasadena, and learned those highways rapidly, right? I mean, I just felt so, I was anxious at first because, it's a fast pace. It's a lot of traffic. It's a lot of different freeways. It's a lot of, it was a lot of unknown. And yet my passion for being there propelled me. And I just felt so proud of myself that I mastered that freeway system, and I mastered knowing my way around the city, and it was a thrill, right? And I felt really empowered. I felt really confident. I felt really the edges that I had pushed and expanded had grown, and I felt fuller. So then, ironically, moving where I'm at now, it's a smaller city, and it's familiar to me, right? I spent some of my teenage years here. And the interesting thing that I've noticed is that I have such a comfort zone where I'm at. It's my stomping grounds, really, from my youth. And I'm very comfortable. I know it like the back of my hands. And what has happened over the last few years is, I don't have to take the freeways. I rarely have to go out of my little circumference. And I started recognizing an interesting phobia that began creeping up a couple years ago. I think it had already, it had started doing that before I really noticed it. But I would always sort of find ways and excuses why I, maybe couldn't go see a friend who wasn't really that far away, but I didn't want to get on the freeway, even though the freeways are less congested, right? Not as speedy, not as chaotic, but I hadn't been doing that for a long time. And I got comfortable and I kind of shrunk back, and my fear grew bigger. And going too far out of where I'm familiar, I've noticed has started to become a little debilitating. And it's constricting my energy. And it interferes with things that I might want to do, people that I might want to spend time with, experiences, right? Going out in nature where there's more spaciousness and the natural world around me. So for this next year, part of my resilience, or remembering my resilience, is to start taking these steps again and to be really present. Now that I actually am conscious that I have anxiety around this, I can begin to access the process easier. Because if we don't actually know what's really going on, it's going to be hard to overcome or transmute whatever that is. So that's just, it's a very benign example. But when I think about getting on the freeway by myself or going out to see a friend, that might be 20 or 30 miles, I start to feel frozen. And that's not working for me anymore, right? And I know what my capability is because I witnessed it, I lived it. And yet that part of me has receded into the background and has rested in this very different, we could say, lifestyle that I've created, safety that I've created, familiarity that I've created, and it's not serving me anymore. So I bring that up because as we're moving into 2025, there's going to be a lot of shifts and transformations. We're already, I think, starting to see those things from the outer world, those things that maybe we don't feel we have a lot of control over, within the collective, those things that might start to percolate fear, anxiety, a loss of control, a loss of feeling that safety and groundedness. And yet, human beings are deeply resilient, and we're deeply courageous when we acknowledge where we're at, what it is that is creating perhaps anxiety, what it is that we're recognizing is inhibiting us and causing us to shrink in some way, shape, or form. And what are some tools that we can bring in order to support our continued expansion, so we can support ourselves and our nervous system and any storylines that we have from jumping us back into back timelines that don't actually exist anymore, and support us in opening up to the new world that is coming towards us, kind of whether we want it to or not, right? It is happening. And how can we move and grow and expand and transform with all of these energies and frequencies that is exactly what they're doing, right? They are doing everything that they can to transform us, to bring us out of that little dot in the center and expand us out towards those parameters. So obviously the first thing is, awareness, awareness, awareness. We have to be aware. I had to become aware that I was using excuses as a way to not push my edges. And once I became aware of that, then I was able to recognize, oh, okay, I'm anxious about this. I have trepidation. I have an underlying current of fear, of out of control, of what if I take the wrong freeway? What if I get lost? What if I have an accident? What if, because I haven't been on the freeways for a long time, particularly as a driver, and now the speed at which everybody drives, it overwhelms me, right? My nervous system and that level of stimulation doesn't feel exciting to me like it did in LA. Like it felt really exciting, right? I was down, I was into it, and I'd go looking for places to live and jobs, and I'd stop at Whole Foods and get my tall mate, and so it's like my system was ready to just, my masculine was in that mode. It was outward, and it was, yes, let's do this. Let's rock this out. And I loved it. It's not really where I'm at anymore. Could be my age. I'm sure that's part of it as well. But that's even a little bit of a funny little excuse and belief system that we have, because it doesn't have to be that way, right? We've been enculturated to think that these are the things. Oh, this is why I'm scared, because I'm getting older now, right? Really? We get to check in. So awareness is going to be first on that list. Awareness, awareness, awareness. What am I really afraid of? And what are the scenarios running through my mind about whatever change is ahead? It doesn't even have to be big change. It can be something like, my routine that I'm really attached to might be, questioned, or I might have to change that. And if my routine or my ritual is part of how I stay feeling safe and grounded, then the shift up in that is going to threaten that very nature, that very way that I have learned to cope around something, right? And when I start stretching that by shifting up my routine or ritual, what do I have then to anchor into? So it can take a variety of ways. So awareness, understanding exactly what's making me constrict. Understanding, is this fear? Is this just resistance, right? Is this a resistance to change? Is it a resistance to what this means if I change and grow? That there might be loss involved, that I might have to step into a new way of being, a more matured way of being, a more empowered way of being, right? Those things might, a more responsible way of being. Those things might sound like, well, of course I would want that. And yet, if we look within, we're disrupting our status quo. We're disrupting belief systems or thought forms or our identifications about who we might be. And that can feel alarming and disarming. So we stay in the same place, the same relationships, the same job, the same friendships. We stay doing the same routines. Right? Everything stays the same, so that we don't have to go into the unknown. So what I'm winding us to is that transformation is the feminine force. It is the feminine life force. And when we stop transforming and growing and expanding and opening, we start to atrophy on certain levels. And then our resilience, our ability or our capacity for even smaller shifts become more rigidified. So we do actually see this a lot in people as they get older. I'm going to suggest that a big part of that is a fear of death. Starts to activate that root chakra, and unconsciously. And so we get more hypersensitive about our health and our well-being. We get more hypersensitive kind of about what I'm talking about, our parameters, how much we go out, how much we feel capable of doing. And if we're plugged into the conditioning, all of those thought forms create the reality then that we experience, because that is the reality we are creating. It doesn't have to be that way. But it's important to go within and look closer at some of these things and come into a relationship, that intimacy with any anxiety, with any trauma responses, with any resistance to our own empowerment, etc., etc., etc. So when I've been working with people, over the years with this, it's not an overnight thing, right? We don't go from, oh my gosh, kind of like me, with the driving. I'm not going to go from not getting on the freeways and being in my little safety net to saying, okay, I'm going to take a road trip by myself, 100 miles away. That's not going to really be the best way to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take baby steps, and I'm going to keep opening and stretching, right, my circumference, because I have to push those edges out. I got to go to the edge and go, okay, now here's the edge. I might just, take a loop around the city. So I know what the freeways are, right? That gives me the confidence. That gives me a sense of knowing. That gives me a sense of my own resilience and capability. So this is a very, for some, this is probably a very, simple and mundane example. However, for me, there's a realness to this. So one of the biggest things, and I know that if you've been listening to me, you might be getting tired of hearing this, but this is a key message. When we are not anchored in our body, when we are scattered energetically, when we are not living from the inside out, these new endeavors, right? These new adventures, they feel less and less safe. The more disembodied we are, the more disassociated, right? The more our nervous systems are activated, the less safe we're going to feel, and the more highly sensitive we're going to feel to the activation of our fear. So for instance, it's taken this last year or two because my nervous system was highly activated in a high level stress state for quite some time, probably most of my life, with pockets, right, where I was able to regulate it, but I functioned well for most of my life with an activated nervous system. That was my yang. That was my excess of yang. That was my excess of fire and air. That was my excess of externalizing. So I spent a lot of time moving out, energy moving out. So it's taken years for me to bring it back, to regulate on very deep, deep levels, not just coming into balance where I feel comfortably energized and relaxed. I mean deep levels of feeling deeply held from that retraction of my energy, my consciousness, my thought forms, everything back within my body, and Art of Sacred Embodiment. My work has been called Art of Sacred Embodiment for over a decade. So one of the things that, I think a saying that definitely applies to me is that we teach what we most need to learn. So most of my life, I have been teaching what I have most needed to learn, because that is the direct experience. That is the path of direct experience. So I get to go through everything, first, so that I can teach it, so that I can share it in deeper, nuanced ways, in subtler ways, and so that I can navigate the energetics of it when I work with clients. So, so I've had to do this deep recalibration to a whole other next level. And the more that I came home, the more aware that I was of the actual anxiety, and that I'd been making excuses. Because when I'm still activated, I think I'm just making excuses because I'm unconscious about the level of which I feel anxious or nervous, afraid, incapable, fearful of storylines that are chattering away in the background that I don't even know are there because I'm not living in my body completely. So the more that that's happened, the more resistant and fearful that I had to acknowledge that I was about this whole situation. So being in the body is key. And if you don't know whether or not you're in your body, you probably are not living in your body. And I know that that seems like a crazy statement because literally, right, we're animating our body. But what I'm talking about is being deeply integrated in our physicality, integrated on all levels, integrated and digesting and assimilating our life so that we are present within our root, right? If we aren't in our body, we're not going to feel safe. And if we are not in our body, it's hard to trust ourselves completely with whatever things are our issues. And we have to come into our body, trust being in our body, trust what we're sensing and feeling, acknowledging what we're sensing and feeling, honoring it, coming into deep relationship with it, working with it as we would a close loved one that we're, supporting each other in whatever that deeper understanding is. So, getting in our body, embodiment. Number one. Nope, number two. Awareness, 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 right? Patience. Number two. Coming into the body, doing what you need to do to know what that really means and how that really feels. And then one of the key points is that I want to bring up, and I'm just going to kind of end with this one because there are other ways that are going to be very personal to everybody. But our connection with the earth is key for us to begin to feel like we can hold steady as the world around us becomes quicker and a little bit more unpredictable. And instead of thinking that we have to manage it all ourselves and know and do it all ourselves, when we can come into a deeper relationship with nature, it brings us into our body. And one of the ways that I work with this with clients, because this is all about the feminine, right? And this is going to be more highlighted and pinpointed as we move forward, working with the sacred feminine and the divine feminine. So those archetypes, those parts of ourselves, and those teachings. The more that we learn to root deeply down, root our nervous system into the Earth's nervous system, the more that we can feel safe with everything that's happening, the more that we are in tune with nature, things that are happening in our 3D realm can start to make more sense. And when I say nature, I mean the earth, the seasons, the sun and the moon, light and dark, and the entire cosmos. So this is the spiraling mapping that I work with. And you can jump on my website at lotuslindley.net and you can see a little bit about that. And there are many blog posts that that are referring to this, even if it's not called that exactly. All of my work is this and has been this. So it's this spiraling that we start to feel safer in, because that spiraling of in and out, night and day, right? Awakeness and sleep, feeling expansive and feeling contracted. All of these things are part of our connection with the evolution that's happening. We aren't separate from all of it. All of it is absolutely perfect. It's our fear and our comfort zone that is being challenged, because that is what and how we're growing. So I'm going to end that there. So if this speaks to you at all, if you're curious, if you're finding some of these things rising to the surface in you, then I invite you to check out my website, contact me. Starting in January is when I'm going to start opening up new spaces for private clients. And I've mentioned this before, it's not a one size fits all, right? We deal with your specific needs from the best way that you will be supported through the modalities and the prism that I work with. It's very intuitive. It's very organic. You lead the way of this relationship for the most part, and then I bring in the perspectives, the potentials, the possibilities, and we work with that grounding in the different ways in order to support your transformation. Because these are big times that we've been in and that we're moving into even more. So as we move through the end of this year, right, reflection on our year brings us deeper awareness, brings us deeper wisdom, and brings all of that energy and all of our doing that's been activated, all of these new things into our being so that they transform us, so that we are enlivened on a whole next level from within. So I encourage that you take some time to really, really use this darkening phase to look within, to integrate your past year. What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? Where have you felt like you're a little anxious to let go of old ways? You know, you don't want to move to the end of that larger circle. And what is serving you in remaining where you are, and what is the disservice, right? What is trying to call you forth? What new timeline is inviting you to step into who you actually are? It's nothing new. You just haven't met that part of you yet. That's all, right? They're there. It's your highest self. Always there. And then what is it that you can start to put into place for 2025 to move you towards those edges that might be feeling, you know, a little closed off? With patience, with love, right? With inner listening, calling on assistance for inner guidance, grounding and rooting, spending more time in deeper stillness and silence so you can hear your own wisdom growing, so you can feel your own deeper resilience present, so you can feel that sacred courage, right? Like lighting you up from inside. It's a very exciting phase that we're in. So with that, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to say, if you celebrate any of the holidays, any part of the world, then happiness, joy, and peace to you. And as we move into the calendar year, new year of 2025, then a very happy new year to you. And for those of us who are really also aligning with the natural time, winter, moving towards spring slowly time, I wish you deep, deep peace, right? And deep peace and stillness and enjoying the dark phase. That's it. Thank you so much for being here. Many blessings, much love. See you soon.